That is our vision, that one day every veterinarian will be just having these in their clinic and be able to use them on any pet.
We'll just start honestly with Gallant in general. What inspired you to found it?
It was actually Aaron Hirshhorn that founded the company. He wasn't in the sciences or anything, but he had a back injury. He went and got bone marrow concentrate injected into his back. It literally cured his back injury. That's what happens when you either see it with your own eyes or experience it in your own body. You become a diehard believer in the technology.
How did you decide that you were using a uterus?
We can get 30 million doses from one uterus, which is just unbelievable. You only need a few to be able to support a whole pipeline of products.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of the Veterinary Roundtable, the podcast where we answer your veterinary-related questions while having some fun along the way. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to leave us a review on your podcast provider of choice, and if you have any feedback to improve the Veterinary Roundtable, let us know. I messed it up because I never do the intro.
You did great.
Yeah, you did great.
It sounded good.
Just to remind everyone to check out our social media channels and our YouTube channel. So they're all at the Veterinary Roundtable. And then we also have a text message feature where in your podcast provider of choice, there's a little link that says send us a message here. You click that, you can text us whatever you'd like, comments, questions, concerns, and then leave your name if you'd like a shout out. Otherwise, it comes through anonymous. And should we introduce ourselves first?
Sure.
Okay, I'm Courtney.
Sure.
I'm Dr.
Emily King.
Oh. That's the problem with not being in person. We can't read each other.
That's right. That's
Okay,
right.
you go again.
I'm Emily King
I am Dr. Ashlyn Duckwall. And here we are.
Yes.
We did it.
with the Veterinary Roundtable. We have, and like Duckwall said, we have a special guest, so we're super excited today.
Yes. Okay, so let's get into her intro. She's a veterinarian, a scientist, and the CEO of Gallant, a biotech company pioneering in ready-to-use stem cell therapies for pets. She holds a DVM degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a PhD in cell and molecular biology from the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, and completed her postdoctoral fellowship at GlaxoSmithKline. Is that? Oh, sorry. Okay. Under her leadership, Gallant is working to bring a new category to veterinary medicine, ready-to-use stem cell therapies that don't just treat symptoms. They aim to restore health at their root. Their first therapy is currently on track for FDA conditional approval. It could become the first ever FDA-approved ready-to-use stem cell therapy in veterinary medicine as early as 2026. She's passionate about her heart-centered leadership and fitness as a mental health tool. Outside the boardroom, she's a writer, check out Stem Cells and Pets on Substack, and an advocate for women in STEM. Please welcome Dr. Linda Black to the Veterinary Roundtable.
Yay!
Yay!
So excited to be with you guys. You guys are such a fun crew.
We try.
Well, thank you.
So
right,
many
we
impressive things in that bio, like so many questions, I feel like. So I feel like we could talk for ages. So we'll just, we'll see where this goes.
Dive in.
Yeah, we'll just dive in. Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the things that I found interesting is that you like fitness as a way of, establishing or maintaining mental health.
Yeah, it's a big part of my life and has been for a very long time. It started actually when I was in my postdoc. Well, I started running before my postdoc, so I was running for a long time. And then when I was in my postdoc at GlaxoSmithKline, I had this guy who was teaching me surgery, like rat surgeries and different surgeries. He was an expert in that. And he was this really buff guy. And he was, and I don't mean from like a relational standpoint, but I just mean he was very fit and he was like mentally really strong. And I just said to him, "Oh, what do you do?" And we, over surgery, we're doing surgeries and we're talking over the dog or whatever. And he said, "Oh, I strength train." And he was clearly a bodybuilder, and so I'm like, "Oh, well, will you teach me?" And so he taught me how to bodybuild. And I really call it strength training now because I'm not really a bodybuilder, you know what I mean? But it just helped me so much to feel empowered and to feel strong. And I just realized over the course of time, the connection between that and my mental and emotional health, it was like, okay, I feel safer. I feel just better in my body, just walking around as a woman, And so I think it just contributed a lot to me feeling strong in the world. And And I use it like I've used it all these years, 25 years now. And, there's been times I've gone through really hard times in my life and I've been in the gym crying, lifting and crying. It's my theme. But it just, so it's a helpful tool to get through life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Release some good endorphins.
Yes, I think working out is so important and just all the endorphins and just everything about it, as far as like
Mhm.
it's a non-negotiable for me and just makes a huge difference in terms of maintaining a certain level of mental health, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
absolutely.
find it.
So you're regimented like 7-day, you go to the gym? How strict are you?
See, so probably all type A's here. So I think I used to be that way, 7 days, et cetera. And then when you get older, you realize, oh wow, like my cortisol is keeping me like on the fluffy side. And so you balance things like, oh, I need to do, 4 days of that and maybe incorporate walking, not so much, other high intensity kinds of things. And so it's morphed over time. So right now I'm on this 4-day regime of lifting and walking and 1 day of, maybe doing some type of hit training. But it all depends obviously too on my job and how stressed I am and things like that. So yeah, that's
Sure.
what I'm currently
Yeah,
doing.
Everybody needs an outlet, so
that's
that's
right.
especially with all
That's
the
right.
school you went through.
Yeah,
That's a
for
lot of
sure,
school.
for sure.
All right, well, let's get into it because there's so many, like I said, there's so much information and so much interesting just topics to cover. So I guess we'll just start honestly with Gallant in general. Kind of just give us and our listeners just a broad picture of like what inspired you to found it, like how has your mission um involved or evolved during the time of just starting it since 2018.
Yeah, it's just been an interesting journey. So we're about 6 years old, and it was actually Aaron Hirschhorn that founded the company, and it was a very interesting story that he wasn't in the sciences or anything, but he had a back injury. He was doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu and had a chronic back injury and couldn't get, mainstream medicine at the time to solve this issue for him. And so he went and got bone marrow concentrate injected into his back. And bone marrow concentrate has stem cells in it, and it literally cured his back injury. And so that's what happens when you either see it with your own eyes or experience it in your own body. You become a diehard believer in the technology. And so he just asked himself, like, why is this not available to our own pets? He had a dog named Rocky who had osteoarthritis and was having a hard time. He's like, why isn't this more widely available? And so that was his start of Gallant. He's like, oh, we need to do something to make stem cells accessible to all pets. And his original idea was to start a stem cell banking business where pets would come in and get spayed or neutered. That tissue would come into the lab and we would bank the stem cells. But when he wanted to partner with me because of my background and in the space, and I said to him, I will get your banking business off the ground, but the real way to help all pets get regenerative medicine is to make it a scalable solution or an off the shelf solution.
Mhm.
And I said, that's going to take a lot more money and it's going to be a lot more time. But if you'll do that, I'll partner with you in this and we can make this happen. And so he agreed. And so we started off. I think it was 4 months, between the time I started and there was a couple other people already on board who had a lab and things. And so I jumped in and we literally started from scratch. We didn't know how to get stem cells out of the uterus when we started. And so, but we had great scientists who had worked in the space and figured that part out pretty quickly. And in about 4 months, we had the banking business up and running. And at the same time, though, we were developing these off the shelf therapies behind the scenes because it just takes a long time to get them developed and doing both. Um, in Then COVID hit and whatever it was, and the banking business, that was sort of the first hit that the banking business took because the world shut down. People weren't like we were all worried about surviving, basically, not stem cell banking. And so we just doubled down though on our side of things and continued to make these allogeneic or off the shelf therapies on the other side. And then we had this tragedy, and that he passed away in 2021. And and we pivoted at that time. So, biotech businesses are all run on a certain amount of cash, right? So you have a certain amount of cash, you have to hit certain milestones to get your next raise done. And he was the one that raised the money, and I was the one that ran the business. And so all of a sudden, I had these two jobs and needed to do both. And we needed to divert all the resources on hand to the off the shelf products. And so we still support our current clients with stem cell banking, but we don't, we're not growing that business at all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that's where we are. We are 6 years in, and we're getting close to our first conditional approval. We have a pipeline of products that are based on this platform technology of stem cells from the uterus, and we're super excited. We're growing right now. We just completed our Series B, so we raised 18 million to get us through this next whole phase and this commercialization aspect of the product. So it's an exciting time for us.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really cool. How did you decide that you were using a uterus? How do you figure that out?
So I think it stemmed from the banking business, and that the idea behind that was pets would come in and get spayed or neutered. It's a tissue that you're throwing away. They can
Right.
send it to our lab, and you're not undergoing invasive procedures of collecting fat, which was the old way of doing stem cells, or collecting bone marrow. You're taking a tissue that you're throwing away, and you're actually making a stem cell dose from it for those pets. So it came from that. And we also acquired some companies that had some IP in the space and some additional knowledge about the technology. And that's what we decided on. And, there was a lot of IP already around adipose derived stem cells and collecting from fat, et cetera. So just from an IP perspective as well, it was better for us to do it from the uterus. But it turns out it's been things I didn't realize then that made the uterus so special. We now know now. For example, the stem cells that come from the uterus are very different than stem cells that come from fat or bone marrow. They have a different secretory profile. They secrete different things that are very beneficial for immunomodulation, et cetera. And so it's one thing. But also, there's something about them that we've been able to figure out that we can grow them much better than we were able to grow, for example, fat cells in the past. And so we can get 30 million doses from one uterus, which is just unbelievable.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
right. So, you only need a
Yeah.
few to be able to support a whole pipeline of
That's
products.
insane.
So
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, I thought that was so interesting that, the 30, that was just mind blowing to
So
me.
it's not like you just need people
Us
from
too.
your way. You just need a few and you're good.
Well, yeah, I think like
Right.
in your guys' bank, right? You have like 6, like there was like a limited number, like, or something like that. I think that.
Yeah, we have 6 right now on what we
Mhm.
call FDA qualified uteruses, and it's not really the uterus, it's the master cell bank and the working cell bank that were created from that uterus. And so these animals, they go through a whole battery of testing that we had to align with the agency on, because you want to be mindful that you're not transferring disease from these cells or something to a pet. And so they have to go under this huge battery of tests for safety and infectious disease, et cetera. So they become FDA qualified. The FDA actually has to check a box and say, okay, these are qualified now to make product from.
So in the future, once
Okay.
you guys start like you're approved for everything, you get to sell it to clinics, whatnot. How are you going to go about like getting? I mean, you're going to have to get more uterus, obviously, at some point. How do you go about finding the pets for that?
Yeah, so pets. So how that works is that we have our own colony at a contract research organization. So we buy the colony, we support the kittens, et cetera. And then that's another thing, is that they're collected during a routine spay from these. Whenever the age group is, I don't know if it's 6 months or 9 months or something, but they're always in our control and care. And then they just get spayed, and those uteruses come to our clinic, or not clinic, but our manufacturing facility, and our manufacturing technicians harvest the stem cells out and hold them there until we're ready to make batches of qualified doses for pets.
Wow. I'm assuming that timeline from the processing is quite short, right? Because you want to go directly from the spay to that process.
Yeah, so the way it works is you collect the uterus, it's sent to our lab, and the first step is to get the stem cells, or the original stem cells, out of the tissue. They then create what they call a master cell bank. And so that master cell bank is a certain number of stem cells in it. And then they freeze all those master cell banks. Then they would take a master cell bank out and they create what they call working cell banks. And so they take one master cell bank out, they grow them up in flasks or in our bioreactor system, they expand them to make more, they freeze down all those master cell banks. And then when, let's just say we need to make 3 batches or, 2,500 doses for a study or something, they take out one of those working cell banks, take it out, and then expand it further.
Mhm.
So they're all grown, each one is grown to a certain passage level.
Wow.
Science is so
Got it.
fascinating.
Different.
Can you can you describe for the listeners how stem cells work, like as far as therapeutics, and then also why you guys chose the diseases that you did to try and attack first?
Sure. So some cells are like master immunomodulators, and they're really our body's natural healing mechanism. So when you cut your arm, it's stem cells that are already in your body that are sort of orchestrating the healing of that by seeing what's there, secreting certain factors that bring in other stem cells and also just what's going on in that area. And so the idea 20 years ago that we're going to take these out of the body, grow them up and give them back was a really novel concept then. And so they're basically working by being master immunomodulators. So they're like little construction crews. So they go into the body. And let's just talk about the first product for feline chronic gingival stomatitis, which is an immune
Yeah.
aberration. You know what I mean? And so they're going into the body. They sense that, and they're like little construction crews secreting things that are going to bring that back into balance. So they secrete things, for example, that modulate T cell activation and T cell proliferation and bring those things back into balance. They also can be synergistic. There was just a paper out from Davis on, I think it was FIV, where you can give it with other drugs and it's synergistic to help pets. And so, we're exploring all of those things as well. But then the way that we chose these conditions were, so we wrote some of the first papers in the space almost 20 years ago now. So we've been in it for a long time. So we've seen a lot with our own eyes anecdotally about what works and what doesn't. So we all sat around a table and we said, okay, these are things we're going after because we know they work. And so,
Yeah.
when you have a biotech company, you only have so much amount of capital to get you so far. You want to be like on the track of what works. And so that's how we initially chose them. The feline chronic gingival stomatitis product, though, is first, and that was really strategic because we have what they call mum status or minor use, minor species on that product, which allows us to get conditional approval. And with conditional approval, you still have to have all of your technical sections approved by the FDA, but your efficacy technical section is based on a smaller number of pets. Okay, so it's reasonable expectation of effectiveness, and so you can get through a little bit faster, but you can still lay all the roadmap you need with the agency to get the rest of the products through. Like you'll know then how to get the rest of the products through, because when you're creating a new category of care, no one's ever done this. So there's
Mhm.
no roadmap with the agency. The agency is not saying to us, oh, do this, this, and this. There's a general framework about what we have to do. But then everything else is a negotiation based on science and based
Wow.
on, everything that we're doing on clinical trials and in our laboratory. So FCGS, we are calling our Pathfinder product because we're not only going to be helping these cats, but this is also validating the rest of our platform.
Wow.
Well, I think that the diseases that you chose, I mean, as veterinarians in practice, I mean, we see these diseases all the time,
Exactly. That's true
like
too. Yeah.
osteoarthritis, atopic
Hmm.
dermatitis, gingival inflammation in cats. I mean, like those are really common problems that we're constantly trying to find appropriate solutions, for. And I think in
Right.
today's world, we have a lot of clients who are looking for non-medication, if you will. I don't know the best way to
Hmm.
describe that, but more holistic
Mhm.
therapies, more,
Exactly.
immune modulatory therapies, things like that,
Hmm.
that they're also seeking for themselves, they want for their pets.
Yeah.
So I love that point. I love that point because that is what this is. And this is why I'm so in love with it, right? Because you're literally taking the body's natural healing mechanism, you're growing it up and you're giving it back. It's supernatural in that way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I agree. I agree with that point.
And I was going to say, all of these diseases are long term quality of life
Mhm.
influencers.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
the stomatitis, you're talking about taking all the teeth out. Like, that's
Hmm.
such a drastic option. Or like feeling atopic dermatitis, we have like no options to treat those
Yeah.
things. And just the pros and cons of the drugs we do have and everything. So I think just I don't know, I guess we can get into like safety profile and stuff like that too, but the concept of, like you said, returning it back to the body, I think does have it provides a more security for those pet owners when they're like,
Hmm.
okay, if I can make their quality of life better, treat this disease, and I'm just using something that comes from them, it really has
Yeah.
such a great platform for that. So I'm curious though, thinking of all like autoimmune diseases that are out there, cancerous processes and stuff, are those candidates you can still look at for these types of this product, or is that something they're just not a good candidate?
Yeah, so this gets at one of the myths that that is developed over time, and that brings up a good point about the old way versus this line in the sand now we're creating, and the new way. And so there's a lot of history and baggage that comes with all the greatness of doing stem cells the old way, and that's one of them. Is that I think historically there was a theory that stem cells can cause cancer or stem cells can contribute to tumor formation, et cetera. And there was actually just a recent paper. I mean, first of all, there's no indication of that in the literature right now, but also there was a
Mhm.
recent paper that actually looked at that. I think it was a 2024 paper that is basically debunking this myth, and actually, stem cells that you've altered in some way, et cetera, are used to being actually to treat cancers. And so that's that point. Autoimmune disease, that's our sweet spot, right? Like anything that is immune dysregulation, that is
Mhm.
what stem cells are really, really good at. And so they're definitely candidates for that.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, Doug, while it would be so much nicer to have a conversation in a room centered around, some type of therapeutic versus, oh, here, let me tell you what we're going to do, take out all your cat's teeth.
Your
Yeah,
Like,
let's
young
what a
cat.
different conversation that would feel like,
Yes.
right. So
Yeah.
I do want to point out so that we don't have a misconception is that this first therapy, the way that it's conceived is that it's for refractory feline
Okay.
gingivostomatitis. So, for example, these cats already are coming to us super sick. They already have all their teeth out, but they're refractory to that therapy, and they're on their way to die, basically. And
Okay.
so,
Okay.
so this is the first generation of this product, and those cats, we have a lot of evidence now. In our pivotal study with the FDA, we had far greater than 70% of these cats improving on this therapy that were at their last step of figuring out like what they were going to do, and so that's really rewarding. But the next step would be to, okay, can we, and there's no reason why this wouldn't work, okay, but we haven't tested it yet. The next step would be, hey, let's go back and look at studies where we don't have to take these cats' teeth out. We did have some partial mouth extractions in this study that responded well. And so that's an indication that it will work when, before we take out all the teeth, but that's definitely a secondary study we have to do.
Yeah. No, that's good
Yeah.
clarification. But I mean, either
Yes.
way,
Thank you.
thinking that you're at the end of the rope, right? And
Yeah.
stress and the emotional
Mhm.
tie with that. But then having this product that could turn it all around, it's still either way, teeth or no teeth. They still do fine without them anyway, but
They do, I
obviously,
know.
eventually we'll try to save
Yes.
them.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
Speaking of all the FDA approval and the hoops you guys have to jump through, I can't even imagine me getting something like this approved. Are there any like big side effects you've noticed so far during your trial studies or anything along that line?
Yeah, sure. The products seem to be tolerated really, really well in pets. It's as easy to give as an IV injection. So that's what you're doing. You're actually taking, you have a little vial. You're thawing it either in your hands or on the table for like 15 minutes, and then you're diluting that with saline and you're giving it as an IV injection. And so sometimes, like the things that we tend to see are nauseous, cats getting nauseated and like gagging and stuff a little bit. There's been nothing that has been not easily resolved. and no really serious adverse events that have been associated with the product. And so right now, I mean, as with any product, there can always, as we've seen, there can always be,
Yeah.
things that come up later. But in my both, career experience with this product, et cetera, they're really safe because the other thing about them is that they're not targeting one thing, right? So sometimes when you're targeting one thing, that thing has many things it affects. They're much more broadly used in the body, and so they just seem to have a fairly high safety profile right now. If you look across the literature and in all of our safety studies and in our pivotal studies with the agency, so still going to be IV, and that was a decision we made really early on. And we know it works that way anecdotally because when you used to treat pets with atopic dermatitis or some other condition where you're giving it systemically, their OA would get better too. And that's
Hmm.
because stem cells can both they're interacting systemically in the body for just inflammation in general, but they also home to the sites of direct inflammation as well. And so if you, for example, label stem cells, Boaz Arzi from UC Davis has a paper about this. You label the stem cells with some radio label and you give it IV to a cat with feline chronic gingival stomatitis. You see some in their lungs, which the lungs are a good place to interact with the immune system, the systemic immune system. And so that's another myth, right? Like, oh, they get trapped in the lungs and they're not useful. No, it's a great place for them to interact with the cells of the immune system and shift the balance of the immune system. And so there's that, but then they also show up in the cat's mouth. And there's many other studies that show if you give them systemically, they end up in dog joints that have osteoarthritis. So we know that they home to those locations when given systemically. And I think our idea initially was, you know what, we want every veterinarian to be able to administer these
Hmm.
therapies. And not every veterinarian, general veterinarian, is comfortable with giving an intra-articular injection, right?
Exactly.
And so it
Yeah.
limits the ability to make it really accessible to all pets. And so,
Yeah, I think that makes it way more user friendly. If you don't have to
right.
give it, IA, I mean, that's a game changer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because definitely people are going to shy away from it. What about you had mentioned briefly that I think you guys had potentially used them with multiple different therapeutics. So, like, if a dog at that age, like say we're talking about canine osteoarthritis, and you have a patient that's
Mhm.
on an NSAID, it's maybe on, something like Adequine. Can you
Mhm.
use these therapies when pets are getting other medications?
Yeah, so we haven't tested all of these things obviously directly, but A, there's no reason why not. B, a lot of our studies they are on a lot of concomitant medications, and so
Right.
sort of testing it sort of passively in all of these studies that we're doing. And there's no reason to believe otherwise that you couldn't. But I think too, as as we all learn how to use these therapies and let's talk a little bit about like why we would use this therapy. And the reason is the differential between this therapy and all the other therapies that you just talked about are this therapy is something that's actually treating the disease at the root cause. It's actually going to go into these cats and fix their immune system issue that they have. They're re-regulating their immune system and different there's different mechanisms of action for osteoarthritis, et cetera. So you're doing something for the underlying disease condition, not just masking the symptom. Now, that's not to say that you wouldn't choose to use both together because, maybe the dog is severely arthritic and you need his pain to be mitigated immediately, or, who knows what the scenario is going to be. Each patient in front of you is going to be a different thought process about how you're going to treat this patient. But stem cells, we believe, definitely should be in the mix as a first choice because of that, what I just said, that they're targeting more the root cause of disease. So you have a pet, for example, out running around on arthritic, arthritic, joints without something on board that is helping the underlying condition. That underlying condition is just, they can't feel that pain, but their condition is getting worse as time goes on.
Progressing.
So
Yeah.
you can imagine, there's a scenario in which a pet comes in, you're evaluating them, it's early stage OA, and maybe you try stem cells first, maybe you or try two things first. Those things will kind of work out over time, but we do believe they should be thought about as more of a first line rather than as a end, an end stage product, a first
With
line
at
therapy.
with atopic dermatitis, are you thinking that you're actually going to cure the patient?
So here's what we know in atopic dermatitis is that there's a dysregulation in that dog's skin microbiome, and there's that dog's skin is not normal, right? So you got problems going on. You got your itch, all right, which current medications are fixing that itch problem, but not doing anything to fix that skin issue. And so in our pilot clinical studies, what we saw were dogs, with excoriated faces from scratching, et cetera, or lesions on their torso, et cetera, that the lesions are healing very quickly. And so their itch diminishes, their lesions are healing, they're just healthier overall. So we have a number of pictures that show this too. That Rebecca Windsor is our director of veterinary affairs, and she's just like massive clinical expert on all of this and can explain it probably in much more detail than me. But yeah, these dogs are improving at the skin level. So we have an atopic dermatitis study going on right now where we're actually looking at before and after biopsies and then doing transcriptomics and things on those samples to really start to understand what are stem cells doing at the level of the skin. So, that's still really in process of learning. But yeah, we believe that they are working at the level of the skin as well as helping the itch of the dog.
Wow.
So in regards,
So if you,
go ahead, Declan.
sorry, I just have I feel like 1,000 questions. It's so fascinating. Okay, so my first thought was you have an old kind of crunchy cat come in, CKD, arthritis, maybe had FCGS or who knows, right? Got all of it. So is the intention behind your products to have one that you would choose the disease that's worse, let's say CKD, and give the stem cell product for that, with then the knowledge that it would help those other couple things going on? Or are these products targeted to say, no, you would do a vial for the FCGS, a vial for the CKD, things like that?
Right. So that's a really great question that we're still working on right now. The products are different. So our intention is that each product is different because they're going to have donors, animals that are specific secretors for the things that disease
Sure.
needs. Okay. It doesn't mean though that, it won't work for the other things. It just might not be optimized for those things. The other products that we have that we're working on are stem cells, what we call prime cells, and we've actually treated those cells with something that make them secrete way more of the thing that we need. If that's the path that we end up, having the products be, then it would probably be, I would advise, treat your biggest condition first and then use the other product for the other conditions. So this is going to get fleshed out probably in the next, 18 months or so.
Do they intend to be lifelong treatments? Do you continue to use them over and over
Question,
again?
like the treatment schedule.
Mhm.
Yeah, so the way that it works is they get 2 initial doses, and
Yes.
then you treat them as needed. So my experience over the years has been let's just talk about OA because that's where I have the most experience. It's very individual. Pets, I would say on average, if I were to scan everything in my past about dogs with OA, it's probably a yearly intervention that you would do. But some dogs last out to 18 months. I think we followed them only out to 18 months at the time. And so some dogs are that long. So it's very individual.
Wow.
But I think on average, and the way we built our own, projection models for doses, et cetera, they're built on, an every 6-month type of dosing regime,
Mhm.
realizing you may not need it in 6 months. You may get it out to 9 or a year. Some of these cats in our FCGS study that are, there's 4 of them that are technically in remission right now. So they've gone from being nothing will save them to stem cells have created such, homeostasis in their body that they are in remission right now. So
Wow.
it can be dramatic.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Especially I just think of all the diseases you're targeting are just so spot on, but
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
CKD, it's always like a ticking time bomb of a waiting game, right? Okay, we'll just start maintenance. And I know I assume the intention is you can't just completely reverse a kidney, right? At least with the CKD product. Is it just to slow it down?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. CKD is a super complex disease, obviously, and we're still working hard on that process. But I think the idea behind it is that fibrosis in the kidney is what we're trying to prevent. And
Uh-huh.
so, it's inflammation in the kidney then leads to fibrosis in the kidney, which, your iris stages just keep going up and, with that process. So ideally speaking, what we would hope for and what we're working towards is intervening in that process, slowing down that inflammation process, therefore slowing down fibrosis and the disease process. Other things that stem cells seem to do, which we don't really understand, is make the cats feel so much better and want to eat. And so, those CKD cats, they're scrawny,
Yes.
they don't eat well. In our original pilot studies, the cats were eating better. More than half of them gained weight. So, and we see that too in our FCGS cats, who have a really, sore mouth, et cetera. They get off, they literally, go off the IV into their cage and want to eat. They're feeling so much better. So, we have tons of videos on this, and we're just fascinated by it ourselves. We sit around the
Yeah.
table and we look at all them, we look at it, we're like, wow. And we don't totally get it all. We don't even understand totally why that happens, but it's a nice, it's rewarding to see them come in, be so drained and not eating, and then all of a sudden they're eating again. Um, so there's other benefits, I guess, is what I'm saying too, besides maybe what it's directly doing for the kidney, et cetera.
Yeah. It's such a cool topic.
A lot.
At where do you see anything happening on the human side that you think is fascinating or interesting?
I love the human side. And uh, they just got their first MSC approval in December of last year. So a product called Ryoncil from Mesoblast. So just like animal health, we have no approved stem cell products for animal health. Well, it was the same way on the human side, and I'm talking about mesenchymal stem cell products. There's a lot of what they call CAR T products, which are technically cell therapies, where they're modifying T cells genetically to treat certain cancers. There's some approved products there, but there weren't any mesenchymal stem cells or stromal cell products until last December with Ryoncil. And same strategy that we have, in that it treats graft versus host disease in kids, and these kids were dying from this, and then they get Ryoncil and they're better. And so same treatment of a immune aberration in these kids, same with these FCGS cats. And they have a whole product line as well, that with the approval of this first product for them, it really validates the rest of their platform and shows them how to get them through the agency. So we're getting there. That's what
Yeah,
I'm trying to
that's
say.
really
It's
interesting.
been slow, but we're getting there.
Do you
Yeah.
see,
Yeah.
I know this is, I don't know, probably not in the near future, but do you guys in your pipeline envision going to the equine world? Because I feel like the equine world would really also
Yeah.
welcome this type of product.
We're all horse people at Gallant. So
Love it.
like Val, me, like we're all horse people. And so yes, we would love an equine program right now. So I will say that we're all pushing for that. Right now, we're just heads down focused on getting this first approval and getting that one moved forward. But yes, we would love an equine product. I mean,
I
that's where
love
stem cells really started.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love that the first product is a cat product, 'cause I can't think cats get the short end of the stick so much in terms of therapeutics, like they're just I think it's probably because of the species and it's just hard, they're hard,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
I think, wow, this could really, be great. I mean, we just have so few things, that we have available for cats. And
Yeah.
so it's really cool.
Yeah.
I think so too. And it was just fortuitous. It wasn't like we predicted 3 years ago, oh, cats are going to be the new dog in this year when we're coming out with this.
Yeah.
But it is sort of like the stars are aligning for us. And to come out with a cat product is very, beneficial right now. So
Yeah. So
I
could you
agree with
walk
that.
through for everybody listening, just like the timeline of rough expectation of, the FDA official approval to shelves and use and things like that?
Yeah, so we're hoping in early 26 to have the first product conditionally approved. We're preparing right now for commercialization of that product. So, Rebecca's on board. I mean, the biggest thing right now for us is really education, right? So that's why we want to talk to people like you who are getting the word out and really helping veterinarians understand the difference between this new way of doing stem cells and the old way. And so maybe I should just talk about that for 1 second. So
Yeah.
really, it's in order for every veterinarian, and that is our vision, that one day, maybe the day I die, that every veterinarian will be just having these in their clinic in a freezer and be able to use them on any pet. And so it's the true mission that Aaron had, to make it accessible for every pet in need. And so to make that happen, you have to do it in this way. You have to have a donor that's a universal donor. You have to have all of these doses in your freezer, and you have to be able to have them on demand. So in your clinic, you could have a little -80 freezer underneath your bench. And then let's just say there were 5 products approved already. Well, any patient that comes in that has any of those conditions, you could go in there and grab that, just like a vaccine or anything else you're grabbing, and use it on that pet. That's our vision. And so that's very different than the old way, which was, you have to collect fat from the dog, you have to send it off, you have to give it back. I mean, it's very cumbersome, it's very expensive. We envision these therapies will not be any more expensive than current therapies that are used for those conditions. So in OA, it's just going to be, those 2 injections are not going to be any more, for example, than a year of Librela or something. Um, so that's the vision. And the challenge for us is educating veterinarians to this. There's some baggage that comes along with the old way and veterinarians' concepts of that. I don't know. I would love to poll you guys in your experience with stem cells. Have you ever used them, the old way, et cetera? And maybe not, and that's fine.
No, I have
No.
not, mostly because
Okay.
of the labor. Like, it's just so
Right.
labor intensive and
Expensive.
expensive. Like, and it was
Exactly.
just too much to, like, even try and approach or,
Totally get it.
talk about,
Yep.
unless you
Yeah.
had a client, Duckwall, and you can disagree, but, like, unless you had a client that was like, "This is something I really wanna do," then you might pursue it, but otherwise, it was like, "No, it's just there's so much
Mm-mm.
there's
Yeah.
so many other
Yeah.
things going on," like, it was
Yes.
so hard.
Yeah.
Totally agree, and this is the exact point, right? And I was part of the team that started that whole old way. We published some of those first papers about the old way, et cetera. And then anytime you're creating, you're pioneering something, it's that way. It starts out clunky, it starts out rudimentary until someone sort of figures out, oh, we have to, in order to really get what we want, we have to be able to scale this. And so that's what we did. And so right now, then it's helping increase awareness for people like you, like, oh, okay, so this is, we have a chance now to actually use this therapy. And I think the other big distinguishing difference is, historically, well, let me just talk about moving forward. All of these therapies moving forward are regulated as drugs by the agency. So we have to go through a hugely rigorous process in order to actually clear all these hurdles that the agency has for efficacy, for safety, and for manufacturing continuity, or manufacturing, making sure every dose has the same potency as every other dose. Very different than the historical way that things were done, okay, which had minimal oversight by the agency. You don't really know what you're getting. You don't know how those cells are manufactured. They're coming from an older sick pet, that kind of thing. So I think I've cleared up all the differences. But
Mhm.
uh, so now it's just really educating. It's the veterinarians that have used regenerative medicine in the old way. It's helping them really understand the differences between the two and how this is going to be a super accessible therapy for their pet. And then for people who haven't used it, to really educate them to, wow, these are therapies that are going to go in and treat the root cause of disease. So I should be thinking about that when I'm treating a patient, um, and having them be part of my cadre of things that I can use to treat patients with as time moves forward. So
You
Yeah.
see these treatments replacing a lot of the other therapies that already exist now in veterinary medicine?
so I think I'll answer that 2 ways. One, they may. Um, if you're using stem cells and in OA or something, and the dogs are doing great, and their underlying disease process is getting slowed, which when that product comes out, like, we'll have a lot more data about that to share. Then it might be a situation where you're using 2 products together. So I really don't want to say it's mutually exclusive. I think it's,
Mhm.
as a veterinarian, our goal is to help you be the healers you were trained to be. And stem cells are part of that, and symptomatic therapy is part of that. I'm still going to be taking ibuprofen for a headache, you know what I
Yeah.
mean. So it just depends on each pet and their condition, and what your professional judgment is about what would be best for that pet in that condition.
And you haven't run into any contraindications, right? I don't think we've asked that yet.
We haven't so far.
Okay.
Out of a lot of studies, a lot of years, we haven't so far. No.
Really cool.
Okay. And I can imagine the listeners might be thinking, even though we talked, briefly about, other products with the stem cell therapeutics, what about vaccinations? Since that's like an immune system, process when you're giving vaccinations.
Mhm.
Um, any thoughts about that, like, or information you can share with them about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, obviously, all of the pets in our clinical trials for both the agency, et cetera, have all been vaccinated, and there's hasn't been any kind of contraindication or issues that have come up surrounding that. But I don't know we've ever answered or had that question posed to us. But I just think all of these animals are vaccinated,
Hmm.
and there haven't been any issues in that regard. So I guess that's what
Yeah,
I'll have to say about it at the moment. Rebecca might have more information that we can get from her.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. You guys have any more questions about the products themselves or anything else in regards to Gallant? I have a few questions for Dr. Black herself, if you guys don't have any other questions about
Um,
the products.
I think I'm just curious, like the biggest hurdles you've faced from the start to here, and whether that's with the regulations. I don't know if it was the coming up with the sheer like pathway to come up with these ideas, but like what do you feel like has been your like one or two biggest hurdles from, I guess, birth to where you're at right now?
So I think the biggest challenges that any company has when they're trying to go from their crazy idea to actually having a product that's approved by the FDA. There's three things I always say you have to be successful. You have to have the talent on board. So you have to have the right team who can actually execute and get stuff done, know what to do it quickly. You have to have um, the technology. So while we chose the uterus and everything, I didn't realize even at the time how great it was going to be, and that we didn't know at the time we were going to be able to create, media, et cetera, that where we got 30 million doses from one uterus. We didn't know that we would therefore have the raw material source for every dose we needed tied up at such an early time point. So that's like, it's just, I can't tell you, like, imagine if you have to surgically excise fat off of a dog for that, or you have to
Yeah.
collect bone marrow, or you have to bleed animals to get their blood like
Yeah.
routinely. Like, you can imagine, right? Like, that's a whole different scenario and set of problems compared to having all of this in your freezer right now. So a lot of things we didn't know that
Yeah.
turned out to be great. Um, and and then the last thing you really need is capital. And this is the hardest part, right? Especially in our industry, there's not a huge, there's only a small number of venture capital that is devoted or devoted to animal health. And so that's just a whole hurdle in of itself. And so in order to make that happen, you have to have the team, you have to have the technology, and you have to be making progress on your milestones. So no one's going to give you money if, they gave you 10 million, a year and a half ago, and you said you were going to do X, Y, and Z, but you didn't really do it, or you didn't do it in time. So you have to, really have integrity and really, be driving towards timelines, um, and have confidence that you can do that. And basically, it's what I call the say do ratio needs to be high. You need to do what you say you're going to do, or you need to be communicating it very upfrontly, very upfront as to why you're having trouble or whatever. And so maybe part of it's luck. I don't really believe in luck, though. I believe that the universe conspires to make good things happen when people have great intentions and are
Mhm.
coming from a heart centered place. And every person on my team is that way, and we are just like more than passionate about this. Like, we have this motto that everything always works out for us at Gallant, and we just go in with that sort of mindset. And we also have this motto that this is happening. Like, no hurdle is too high, no problem is too big, that we are figuring this out. And when you have that mindset, you just do it. It just happens for you. And people want to help you. I mean, that's the other thing I've
Mhm.
recognized over the years is that, wow, when you go in with that mindset and that attitude and that confidence, like, no, this is going to happen or we're all going to die trying making it happen. And so I've said that in investor meetings, we will die trying making this happen. And so I think when you have that, then actually it does happen, right? Because you're just a problem solver. This is my latest thing is like, I realized like, I'm just a problem solver in my business. Like, that's all I'm doing. Problems come up. It's like, oh, we got to solve that. Like, and there's always a solution, people want to help you. There's always people who can help you. It's another thing I say, there's always people who want to help you, especially when you're easy to work with, when they see your passion and when they can see the vision that you're trying to bring to the world. And so,
I think that's a great segue into, maybe a few of these other questions from the standpoint of, our podcast listeners, a lot of them are students, a lot of them are veterinarians, early in their careers. And, a lot of the questions that we get from them are about, the struggles and difficulties and things like that. When you went to vet school, when you decided you were going to go to vet school as a young person, did you know this is what you were going to do? Did you right? Okay. So, like, can you speak to some of these, younger people about that's okay, that, like, you didn't have to have, like, it completely planned out perfectly, that you were willing to pivot and, change directions. Can you speak a little bit about that journey?
yeah, um, young people seem to want to have it all figured out, and including my own son, who I've had to sort of counsel about this, and remind him about how many times I had to change my path or changed my path. And so I kind of look at it like we need to be doing the thing that is most exciting for us at the time until the moment we realize it is not the most exciting thing for me anymore and I'm not fitting anymore with this. And if you think about how we grow as human beings over our life, right? How we psychologically grow, emotionally grow, um, it would make sense, right, that your passions might change or that, what you love doing might change. And so for me, I was a horse person. I became a veterinarian because my veterinarian saved my horse's life, and on that moment in time, you know, chokes me up. um, it's what I wanted to do, and so I had my heart set on that. I got out of that school. I did 3 years of equine practice, and I realized, like, wow. And I should also say, at the same time, I was also doing research at the veterinary school, which I also fell in love with because I had this very curious mind, and I was like, "Ooh, this is so cool to figure this stuff out." And so here I was 3 years into equine practice and realizing, oh my gosh, the thing I wanted to do my whole life, it's just all I wanted to do, I'm is not resonating with me anymore. And the reason why at the time was one, I was, figuring out I loved research more, but two, I realized like, okay, horse practice is not in the field, is not the level I want to practice. I want people just, tended to want you to treat their horse without getting diagnostics done. I called it kind of
Mhm,
cowboy medicine, and that just
mhm.
wasn't who I was. Many veterinarians, they can do that. They have a great life. They help a lot of people, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I personally, it didn't resonate with me. And so I pivoted. So then I decided, oh, well, I like research and I like clinical medicine. I'm going to do a comparative medicine residency. And so that's when I went to GlaxoSmithKline and I learned all about drug development in the human space. And I helped the scientists there with their animal models that they use to translate drugs from the bench to the patients, to human patients. Then I realized, like, wait a sec, I love research too much or so much that I want to get my PhD because that's how I can really do it. And honestly, then I went to Penn, got my PhD in cell and molecular biology. I legitimately was going to be a basic cancer biologist at an institute. I loved cancer biology. My PhD was in cell and molecular biology, all about DNA damage checkpoint pathways and stuff. It's like a bunch of boring stuff, um, but I loved it at the time. And then I became a mother, and I had my son. And when I became a mother, I realized, wow, I really can't. I don't want to leave him and go do another postdoc and have another 80-hour weeks and have him be raised by someone else. And so I just made the decision, like, I'm staying home and I got to figure it out. And I stayed home and I started a science writing business just to keep abreast. Like, I love to write. And so to keep abreast of science, what was going on in science, to make sure my CV, I could still have a space where I, had something on my CV, and created a science writing business until he was about 4, and then went to consulting at an animal health company where I learned all about drug development on the animal health side. So you can see that, of course, I had no idea about any of those things. Okay.
Right.
Then from there, I went to that biotech company that was for regenerative medicine, and I fell in love with regenerative medicine. But you can see that each one of those experiences prepared me for what I'm doing today. So I used my clinical expertise in my job. I used to be more of a chief scientific officer and president, and so I don't do so much clinical medicine or science right now. But all of those experiences prepared me in so many different ways for the job that I have today. And so I think it's so normal that you don't know, you know?
Uh-huh.
And I think it's just so important to listen to your heart about what is exciting you next and trust that, you know, the path is going to unfold before you as you continue to take the next right step for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think being open to each step too, right? Like if you were so gung ho on sticking with equine medicine only, or not listening to what your interests were, you would be in a completely different situation. So,
That's exactly right. And so you just said a key thing there, listening to what your interests were. And so this is where I think it's so important to be tuned into your own heart and your own, being very self-aware about what's going on inside of you, about um, what's bothering you, about where you're at, what is because maybe it's just, like, I'm really an introvert. And so, for example, like, part of my job that's difficult now is when I have to network or I have to really be in an extroverted sort of place. I can do it. I've learned how to do that, but I'm really an introvert. But I think just paying attention to what's on the inside of you and understanding what you love, what you don't like, what your limitations are, understanding your own personality, um, are really key to figuring out, the next steps. And you don't have to have the whole thing figured out. I just never knew this is where I would be ever. I'm excited about it. I love what I do, but yeah, I didn't know it.
Yeah. Okay, next question I had was, as a writer, you're probably an avid reader. So what is the most recent book that you've read is one question. And then the other question I have for you is, who do you use now in your career as somebody to inspire you or to learn like leadership from or those types of things?
So one book I'm reading right now is right here. It's actually called Today Was Fun, a book about work by Bree Groff, and I just started it. So I actually found her on Substack. Substack is a great place to learn about new books, by the way. Um, but the other book that I was reading lately too was Travis Bradbury's Emotional Intelligence book. So I very much love all of those kind of leaders that are very focused on heart-centered leadership. And so Simon Sinek,
Uh-huh.
those, I'm more following those kinds of people right now. And that is a big passion of mine, is to really, when we started Gallant, we really wanted the culture to be different. And you learn about, good leadership and bad as you go along in your career, and you have those things, right? You have, you learn just as much from having a poor example of leadership
Uh-huh.
as you do having a good one. And many of us have certainly had more poor examples of leadership. And it was really important to me that when I started Gallant, I wanted a a culture in which people always felt respected and heard and valued. And it's really something that's important to me, that every person on my team feels valued first as a person, a human. If somebody's coming to me that, oh, I'm so sorry, I cannot do this, Linda, because I've got, they're not feeling well or whatever. It's always about them first, because if they're not okay, the business is not okay. Right. And so them knowing that I care about about them as people first and not the business, it's just very helpful to the culture. So doesn't mean we're a group of 90% women. I don't know, you're probably mostly women in your organization too, but when you get a group of type A women together and who are going after something that nobody's done before and that are super passionate, each in their own way, clashes can come up. Clashes can come up. But we try to, resolve them in ways that are healthy. And I take a lot from my therapy experiences. I've had a lot of therapy, so I take a lot into. Sometimes I legit have said to um, close colleagues at work, like I'm just being a therapist today. I'm literally being a counselor in the business today. That's been my job today. So but it's all good, and I just think that's so important, and it's so important too to set those examples. Like it's like I don't require things from other people that I'm not doing myself. And
Mhm.
so we're all sitting around a table. Hot opinions can come out. People get very heated. The ability to self-regulate your emotions, to still speak respectfully when in your head you're going, that is the effing craziest thing I've heard. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
inside your brain and your inside voice, you're saying that, you
Yes.
know, um, it's just super important to model that behavior for others. And we're all growing together, at Gallant, like really all growing together, not only as professionals, but as people. And that's really important to me, especially the younger people coming in to the organization, helping them grow professionally, but also growing as people. So
Mhm.
it's not all separate for us. It's all together for us.
Very cool.
That's great. I feel like we can kind of like, I don't know, similar but different, right? We started this podcast like how many years ago now? 5 years?
Oh, it was a while.
It was a long
Yes.
time ago.
I
I
love
don't
it.
know.
Yeah.
But like watching all of us kind of grow together and like sharing in these experiences of learning new material and like walking through all of it, the business aspect of it, what's our goals, what's our vision and everything, and just making sure ultimately everyone wants to be heard, valued, but on the same page. So I think it's,
Yes.
like I said, not trying to take away, you guys are doing life-changing medicine, but I can definitely relate and, just value what you're saying as far as like your culture that you envision and what you really take home to then help have Gallant succeed, right? Like that's a
Mhm.
big part of
Yeah.
it. Starts there.
I love that you guys did this podcast though. I love podcasts. Uh and it's just, it's very entrepreneurial for you. And so, I mean, what are your goals with it? I think your goals are to educate, and you're getting educated too from all the people that you're talking to, but what are your goals?
I think we all agree we just want to make a positive impact on we
Yeah.
have, like Dr. King said, a lot of students, people wanting to get into the field, but they have reservations, whether it's financial reservations, the stress of it. So I think the intention is to have a look inside of, yeah, some cases are hard, some situations are hard. We're going to talk about it, but then this is how we process through it, how we turn it into fun, how it can be fun. I think that's the biggest thing
Yeah.
is especially when I got out of school, I was like, "Oh gosh, this is horrible. Like this is a really hard
Yeah.
job." I
Yeah.
honestly first year I didn't want to do it, but then you
Yeah.
like just like along your path, you try to find what you're interested in, the joys are where you can then bring out yourself and as you said, it kind of lines up to help making an impact in some way. And so, I don't know, that's kind of my perspective of
Yeah.
it.
I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah, no, I
I
mean, I
love
think
it.
that's really important. Our field is just, just wrought with just, a lack of
Yeah.
joy, and
Yeah.
unhappiness, toxic workplaces, like, I mean, the list goes on that make people want to leave the industry. And so somehow figuring out one, hey, listen, let's tackle some of these difficult topics. Let's talk about how you have these conversations. Let's figure out how you create workplaces that people want to be involved in and that you yourself, even though you may not be, the head of the organization or the head of the clinic, you still can have an impact. That is a mindset. And so trying to teach people that aspect, to try and so that they have some ownership and can make a difference in their clinics and then can bring joy back to the industry. Because
Love
it can be a place that's a lot of fun. Yes, it's very hard. Yes, it's taxing, but you are making a big difference, and you're unique and you're special. And so like just being out there saying those things and getting people to kind of shift their mindsets, really, I think, is
Love
one of
it.
the big things too.
So good. I love to hear that, because you're so right about that. Like, you can be in the worst situation, but if your mindset is on track, you can make it better, and you can actually make a difference in the way people are viewing the situation right around you. And the more, it's like being a little light, right? Like, you're a light,
Mhm.
and then other people get the light, and then I don't know, it does, it's a ripple effect. Now, one toxic person
Oh,
can undo that pretty quickly,
Yep.
but
A bad
but
apple can ruin the
yes.
whole
right.
barrel of good
There
apples.
you go.
Absolutely.
There,
Yeah.
there you go.
And your
Yeah, I
product will
just,
make our jobs easier. We're so excited.
Yes. So, yes,
It's a
thank you for
circle.
that. Exactly.
yeah,
Oh
well,
gosh.
happy to do what we can.
Yes. I don't.
All right.
Yeah.
You want to close us out, Duckwall?
All right.
Well, you know what? Maybe we should finish with the question we typically ask everyone, which is, if you wanted to do you have any
Oh,
pieces of advice
if there's
or,
like one main, right? We usually say if there's like one
yeah.
thing you want
Mhm.
our listeners to take away from this information today, putting you on the spot a little bit, what would it be?
Mm,
Why all that?
mhm. Uh, well, about Gallant and Gallant products really it's a whole new category of care, and that it's a whole different way of thinking about treating disease, and that you're using something that will actually affect the biology of the pet. It's actually treating disease at the root cause. So that's that. And the other little piece of advice, or, anecdote I'd like to share, is take care of yourself. Like, all of these, people who, just like you were just talking about, it's so hard. They first come out, et cetera. Just, don't abandon yourself to the point that you're not taking care of yourself as you go through your career journey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Perfect.
absolutely. The great
Yeah.
advice.
Thank you so much, Dr. Linda, for
Yes. Thank you
just
for
being with
joining
us
us.
and everything. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. I love talking to you guys.
Let's do it again.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Veterinary Roundtable. Remember, send in those questions and leave us a review if you enjoyed this episode or previous one. We'll see you next week for another episode of the Veterinary Roundtable.